So it's a quiet news day, so let's jump into yet another Transformer Slag podcast Patreon listener question. Once again, if you want to join the Transformer podcast Patreon, come hang out with us on our Discord, get your name on the end credit scrolls, get some cool stuff in the mail past a certain tier, get some cool Transformer lore from the Discord, or even that, special deals, and you could get some cheap Transformer product, build up your collection. Or, of course, like our listener today, ask one of the Patreon listener questions. We got an amazing Patreon listener question from TTPS Customs, and he wants to know, and you know what's interesting about this one? This is a topic that we answered almost 4 years ago, and I'll get into that actually. So here's his question. Hi, Proto Man. So far, War for Cybertron trilogy has been my favorite line of Transformers in all of history. Due to the updates of figures that we haven't had an update in a very long time, like Beast Wars characters, overall, the whole design and details of figures are just beautiful, especially for me, like someone from the Radicon. Radicon is people who do customs, especially from the TFW 2005 community. So I wanted to know, what is your expectation or predictions for the future of this line moving forward? By the way, I love the podcast. P.S. I want a new pterosaur, or if possible, an official More Than Meets the Eye Tarn. TTPS Customs. Thank you for being a fan, TTPS. Check out his stuff, I guess, on Instagram, because he does a lot of customs on the Radicon and everything. So, as I mentioned before, 4 years ago, me and Jaws D, we did a similar question where we answered, like, where did we think Transformers was going to be going? And at that time, we were just finishing up Power of the Primes. Like, we were just on our way out of Power of the Primes, and what was going to be the future. And me and Jaws D, we predicted Micromasters and Beast Wars. And if you look at the comments on that video, that, you know, recent comments, no, I don't work for Hasbro directly. I do stuff with them, but I didn't, like, you know, spill the beans, and I'm not a prophet. It's just, that was the logical conclusion of where stuff would be going to keep things fresh. Yeah, you're still going to get the top beats. You're still going to get the Optimuses, the Bumblebees, the Megatrons, the Starscreams, but you also got to mix up the line in terms of gimmicks and stuff that's going on. And when you looked at what was done already, leaving that Prime Wars trilogy, they had already done Headmasters. They had already kind of done Target Masters. They had already kind of done Pretender Shells. Where do you go from there? And it was pretty much like when you check off that list at that time, I was like, well, logical conclusion due to timing and everything. 90s kids, you got the Micromasters and you got Beast Wars. And, well, what do we have today? We had Micromasters in our previous parts of the War for Cybertron trilogy, and now with the final part of the trilogy, we have our Beast Wars. So where do we go from here? What happens after Kingdom? What is next after Kingdom? And I've answered this question a lot of times on my streams, but I figured I might as well have a segment that kind of covers that too. And I have two answers to this. Number one, depending on how well Kingdom sells in that initial first wave, because it can't be how well it sells in wave 2, 3, 4, 5, because it would already be too late in development for what would be planned for the future. But how that first wave sells is going to be a strong indication of what they're going to want to go do in the future. If wave 1 sells like gangbusters, and from what I could tell, it's selling pretty well, we're probably going to see some more Beast Wars. Not and this is one thing I have to remind people. Even Kingdom is not really a Beast Wars line. There's still a very strong split, if not a still very strong Generation 1 presence in this Kingdom line. But what I'm trying to say is that we will see more Beast Wars going into whatever the next series is, much like how Micromasters were kind of a bit of the theme with Siege, and they bled over into that of Earthrise also, and didn't make it to Kingdom because they did sell well with Siege, but with Earthrise, it was already kind of on its way out, which is unfortunate because I love the Micromasters. But I think that if the Beast Wars stuff is selling really well, from what I could tell it is, we're going to see more of that. Possibly the characters that maybe TTPS mentioned here, or more. Season 2 characters, Season 3, non-show characters. That would be great. The other side of that is if it doesn't sell well, or if Hasbro is not feeling what's going on with essentially the plans, not to mention what will be the anniversary year for 2022, I could see a Unicron trilogy direction. Where's the next aesthetic, the next group of characters, the next trademarks and IPs that you could target? And that would be the Unicron trilogy. 2022 will be the 20th anniversary of Armada, aka Micron. So it's a kind of also a very topical and smart direction to go to. Not to mention, when you go with Beast Wars and Beast Wars characters, you're refreshing those IPs that really haven't been staples and used in the past while with Hasbro. Where if you go in the Unicron trilogy direction, there's a lot of IPs and trademarks there that you could use to keep those names refreshed, like a Red Alert, like a Hoist, Smokescreen, like a Blur, or a Thrust, or a Starscream, or Demolishor, or Nemesis Prime, or Scourge. I mean, I could just go on and on. If you just name like a whole bunch of Armada characters, you cover a lot of trademarks and IPs that need to be used consistently anyways. The second you get into Unicron trilogies like Energon, aka Superlink, and Galaxy Force, aka Cybertron, that doorway widens even more. But what that does is you create yet another trilogy of characters. And it doesn't have to be 100% Armada. You could have that, there's still some Beast Wars characters trickling in, but the overall arching theme is that in a Armada kind of aesthetic. Just kind of how like Kingdom, while it's kind of an overall Beast Wars aesthetic and setting, it still has a primarily focus of Generation 1 stuff. I made a comment not too long ago. If you look at the second wave of Kingdom, there's two Beast Wars characters, Air-Razor and Dinobot. The rest of the line is the rest of that wave is Generation 1 characters, or I guess middle of the road characters like those fossilizers that are kind of not one or the other. So keep that in mind. It's still primarily a Generation 1 focused brand. And if you go with Unicron Trilogy, you could kind of still maintain those IPs and play it safe while appealing to a 20th anniversary of a new demo that grew up on Armada and Unicron Trilogy, while celebrating the 20th anniversary of that line, while giving people something fresh, while keeping those IPs safe and those trademarks safe. And you could bleed in some Beast Wars. And actually, the funny thing is, in all things considered, even when Armada was fresh and brand new back in 2002, there was Beast Wars molds being used in Armada. There was the Cheetor mold, the Transmetal Cheetor, Transmetal Megatron, Transmetal Air-Razor, Transmetal Rhinox. Those were all Beast Wars molds that were used in the Armada line. And if you do reimaginings of Season 2 characters, like you give a Transmetal Cheetor in this new line, you could then do even that Armada color scheme at some point, Generation Selects or whatever. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But the point is that there's so much there. There's so much there. There's meat on the bone that you could use. And from a business standpoint, it just makes sense. And that's how I came to that same conclusion back 4 years ago, where Micromasters and Beast Wars made sense to be the next direction. And it's the same thing that I see here. It just makes sense. And that's kind of the way that I cut it and I see it. Like there's no real like definitive 100% this is how it should be. But if the variable steering wheel was in my hand and I decide where the next way would be to go, keep things fresh, because that's what keeps the brand alive, is keeping things fresh, transforming the brand, no pun intended. That's where I would go. And that's where I see it, in all honesty, going. If, again, the Beast Wars stuff sells really well, we're going to see a lot more of it. But even if it doesn't sell really well, we'll still see some of it in a smaller capacity. But I think that there's a new theme coming up. And it just makes sense to kind of celebrate the past, because that's always the best thing to do while keeping it fresh for the future. So I hope that answers your question, TTPS Customs. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think the next step should be? This is what I think, but what do you guys think the next step should be? What should be the next stuff that we see from a theme? And like he mentioned, he'd love to see Pterosaur and he'd love to see Tarn. Tarn, I don't know if we'll see something from. I would like to see a Tarn, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. I think Pterosaur's due. He's going to get something at some point for sure. And also Pterosaur, again, was one of those characters that also kind of had a little bit of a presence in that of the Unicron trilogy kind of molds and stuff. So it's not out of the question. So let me know what you think, guys. And if you want to be, again, like TTPS and join the Patreon, check the description below, patreon.com/protoman. Check the pinned comment and come join the Patreon. Join us, hang out, support the podcast. Let us know we're doing a good job.